Segue. So great.
Oh,
Okay,
we're
speaking of
live.
segues, Miss Nicole Jarbo. So great to have you back on the podcast. What's up?
Hello. I'm so happy to be here. And you're gonna send me a link so I can send this to my mom so she can watch live. And then we're gonna
If
jump
mom is
into it.
watching, yeah, if mom is watching, then we've done something right.
Yep,
Yes, you're about to
yep.
get all the links in a minute. How are you? It's good to see you.
I am good. I'm really great. I'm really great. You and I got to catch up briefly before this started and went live. I'm back in the ed nonprofit game, back in the mix, and it's very fun. It's just really cool to be around like so many brilliant people who care about something.
Yep,
I try to surround myself with those people, but I've been energized for the past like 2 months.
it's great. It's
Yeah.
better than I think what most adults can say. We'll definitely get into that. I dropped the link in the comment chat or in the comment section, so you should be able to pull it. Nicole and anybody else who's watching us should be able to
All
pull it as
right.
well to share it.
Cool.
Um, yeah,
Let me
I think a few
just
things for our listening audience, right? So, like, obviously, everybody knows Nicole Jarbo. She's world famous. Part one. Part two is that she's one of the few guests to jump back on the podcast, which I don't know if that says something about me, the host, or just our guest, but nonetheless, we're happy she's here. But for those keeping track at home, she joined back. This is also kind of crazy. It was almost a year ago to the day, 2 years ago, when you were on the podcast the first time, chatting
Oh,
about
really?
good bets and other things. Yeah, so it's like almost it's our. This is great. It's our 2 year anniversary, and then you have
Oh
another two
my
year anniversary
gosh. Yeah, but
coming
that's
up.
not for a while. Don't
Okay.
don't like take the shine away from our 2-year anniversary. That's in June. It's totally fine. That's so funny. I think I knew that, but yeah, I was like, "Oh, March. Time just
Yeah,
like flies by so fast."
I know.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Um,
Now we can talk about all of the disastrous things that have happened since we were last here together.
and all the things that we will fix. Um,
Yeah.
okay, and then you're in Oakland today, right? How are things going in Oakland?
Things are going great in Oakland. The sun is shining. That's all I really like want these days of my life is the sun shining. And did I get some sleep? And is someone yelling at me? I don't actually like the yelling part. Is someone not yelling at me? So if all those things are happening, I feel like they're solid, really solid.
Uh, Sometimes when people ask, I tell them that we made payroll last month. It looks like we're going to make payroll this month, and I have food in the fridge. And it's like check one,
Yeah.
check two, check three. Everything else is gravy.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I'm like really
Good.
excited to have this conversation too, just because, coming back into this space, and obviously some folks might not know me. Um, but coming back into this space is just like it's a serious homecoming. And it's
Mm,
not just it's not just that person that you knew, you're in the same place, you smell the same smells. Um, it's helped me actually kind of re-engage with I think who I am and like what's important to me. And so I'm still like riding that wave right now. So let's not mess it up.
I'll do my best. No pressure. No pressure. I'll do my best. Um, yes, it is very good to have you back for a number of reasons. We were on like a really fun California string. So we had Ali Medina recently from Oakland, the Oakland Public Education Fund, which maybe you know,
I
which I'm
do.
sure you do. Yeah, we had Irene Shee recently from the Bay Area and My Matters Bay, and now you. So we're gonna need to open a West Coast Square Pizza studio here soon, so we can be more accessible to the people
As long as I
in
can creep around it, I'm fine.
yeah,
But
you can
yeah,
be first.
really, really phenomenal women. It was really cool to kind of listen to the podcast because I've been following both of their work for some time.
Oh,
But
cool.
yeah, Oakland is full of great people. I'm pro Oakland for sure.
Yeah, which we knew.
Well, I
And
think
yeah, you can be.
Irene, is it Irene? She's in
Yep,
San Mateo, which I feel
that's right.
like
That
is
sounds right.
close enough. Close enough.
Yeah, for a non-geography major and a person that doesn't live in California, yeah, that sounds right. I'll assume what you're saying is accurate.
Perfect.
I know we're going to spend a lot of time on kind of current passion project and the work you're leading, and I think the leader I think perhaps you're trying to find for 4.0. But before that, I think last time we chatted with you, we learned so much about the fundraising work you were doing at Good Bets, and then you kind of transitioned and launched your own thing, which is Boost. I know you've been really vulnerable and honest, which I think is really great from a business owner perspective, an entrepreneur perspective, which I think in my perspective, sometimes those things are over romanticized for right or wrong reasons. But yeah, Nicole, I'd love whatever you're comfortable, just kind of share people, from Good Bets to Boost to here, kind of what you've been working on, and kind of what you learned from the Boost experience.
Well, I'll give a little bit of context into who I am and in terms of what I've done or spent my professional time doing. I started out teaching. I first started out my education career as a lecturer at UC Berkeley, which is incredibly random to be a 22 or 23-year-old trying to get 20-year-olds to stop talking while you're talking. So yeah, I've constantly just been bullied as a teacher. But I started that, and then I really wanted to get on the ground. I was in grad school, and a lot of folks were like, "Hey, your head's in the clouds. You have all these ideas, but you don't have any. You don't know what it's like at all to actually, do this work." And so, don't threaten me with a good time. I decided to go to probably the hardest place I could go to with the hardest placement. So I went to New Orleans, Louisiana, obviously post Katrina, through Teach for America, and I taught special education. And so, that's just such a trip. I want to be brief for the sake of time, but I would say that really shaped kind of what I thought was possible, not just for people in general, but just for myself. And so I think I always kind of, starting my professional career, had this little entrepreneurial desire in me. I didn't know what an entrepreneur was. I didn't know anyone who had started a business at that point, but this sort of spark was starting to develop in me. And so I was in New Orleans. I got a chance to be part of this really cool educational entrepreneurship community called 4.0, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a second. But I just met a lot of really cool misfits. A lot of them were teachers. Some of them were developers. Some of them were doing different things in the city. But we're all brought together by this desire to make education better. And so met a ton of people, expanded my horizons, really started to identify as a founder. And so I went and taught high school after that. And so I helped found a high school in New Orleans. Again, this spark of entrepreneurial energy. And even though we don't consider maybe a founding teacher at a high school, an entrepreneur, I think we should. I think we should start thinking a little bit differently about folks who are courageous enough or stupid enough, depending on when and where you ask them, to try something new, to push their own limits in service of doing something much bigger, right? So I think that's kind of where a lot of that started for me, and I just got really curious about everything. After being in 4.0, I realized that a lot of the challenges that actual entrepreneurs were facing were around funding. And so I ended up moving to DC and working as a philanthropic advisor with folks, where I was really focused on helping them learn about the educational innovation landscape, the reform landscape, workforce development, economic sort of opportunity. So these different areas. And I really get to talk to people who, themselves were incredibly wealthy, richer than you could probably ever imagine. I was telling a friend the other day, my first assignment there was to memorize the 400 richest families in America. And so to just get a sense of how, I had to orient myself. And yeah, it was also really, really cool, because that was another moment where I started to actually learn more about business, directly from people who had built these sort of, amazing businesses and were able to have such an impact commercially, who also wanted to give back. right?
Mhm.
So I've been like really lucky that I've got to operate in this like giving back and trying to do well for yourself kind of duality that sort of makes me who I am.
Yep.
Yeah, then ended up leaving that because it was cool for a lot of reasons, but also torture. So I
Mhm.
left and then went back to the entrepreneur side, worked at some charter schools, did some fundraising, and then started Good Bets. And so this is the point in our relationship in which we've met, like our origin story. I started Good Bets, which grew into basically a little consulting practice that was helping people who wanted to build really ambitious projects, but from the get go in their DNA, have them fundable or
Mhm.
sustainable. Right. And so I had this really unique experience where I actually worked with donors and kind of knew what they wanted and potentially had empathy for them and their billions of dollars. But I was able to
Potentially
kind
seems like
of
a very intentionally used word there. But
It
keep going. Keep
depends. It depends.
going. Yeah, yeah.
Um, I have met some of the coolest billionaires ever and some of the not as cool billionaires. But you remember there's a filter because all of the people I met actually wanted to, give money
Some
back.
bias. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, there was a bit of a filter, but you still meet all kinds. But yeah, I was super thankful for that experience because I didn't know at the time that it was giving me this really rich um perspective on how to help people who looked like me, who, maybe were also like a little rough around the edges, how to help them better communicate what they were building with these people. And so, Good Bets, the name actually came from the work I was doing with philanthropists, where they would do this thing where they called everything a bet.
Mm.
And I thought
Yep.
it was so weird, but I'm like, oh, this is how they see this.
How
Like
they
it's
speak
all
about
it's all a gamble. And so I was like, well, what if I could do something where the mission was essentially to help people, become a better bet.
it.
Better bet is like not cute. So we went with Good Bets. And so yeah, it was such a cool experience because I got to learn about um how to build what people needed,
Yep.
and how to make sure that they could kind of see their dreams come to fruition in a way. And we got to work with um, really cool, interesting places, lots of charter schools, lots of interesting nonprofits and projects, a bunch of for profits from like global, like, skincare brands to, hair cutting nonprofit with like a budget of 10 grand. And so
Yep.
it was probably actually one of the most rewarding things I've had in my life. This is weird to reflect on, but yeah. And then we met, actually, I think we just jammed on this.
Yep.
I'll let you take that story on because now we're approaching the beginning, and I'll talk about Boost and the present in a second. But yeah, where did we meet, Greg? How did this happen?
I think we're still trying to figure that out. I think the two leading candidates are either a TFA alum conference in Phoenix, a social entrepreneurship conference that TFA used to put on. I don't think it does any longer. I think you probably like were the keynote speaker one year, and they were like, "This is the best we're going to get," and then wrapped it up after that year. So that's option one, and or option two is that I think you and I are both alums of 4.0, which we'll talk about. And I did a short kind of weekend sprint program there a few years, many years ago now at this point, almost 10 years already. Don't tell anybody. Uh, and a world in which we met there as well.
Yep. That's so funny. They're like, Jarbo, you can speak. And then we're gonna cancel this conference. We're never gonna have it again.
You realize we're
But
only going to go downhill after
yeah,
Jarbo speaks. So let's wrap it. Let's go out on a high.
I was thinking of it the other way, but I guess like because I'm a guest, you're not allowed to make fun of me. So I'll bring my own self-deprecating comments to this.
Better if you lead with that, so then I can figure out where to jump in
Yep,
the longer way.
yep. He's a cool guy, everyone. Don't worry. Yeah. So yeah, that conference was really great. I mean, and this is actually a really great segue into 4.0, but I will stop because people asked about Boost and then people want to know what it feels like to fail publicly. So I'll do a little stint there and talk about more
Please.
interesting things.
No, yeah,
Um,
whatever you're comfortable with.
yeah, so I put out this LinkedIn post, I don't know, last month maybe. Um, and I wrote that in like 5 minutes.
Mm.
And I needed to announce, actually, this is like the behind the scenes story, I guess, of this post. Um, but I needed to kind of announce to my professional network that I was transitioning, so I could transitioning to like the interim CEO role, or from Boost. So people kind of didn't think there was overlap there, and wanted to make sure that people kind of understood what was happening. And so I just wrote up this post like very quickly. I sent it to a friend of mine, texted and was like, "Hey, does this like look fine? Are there any spelling errors?" And he's like, "Yeah, sounds great. Like, I love it." And he's this broy dude who like played football at University of Miami. And I'm like, "Did you even read it?" But I posted it and it got such a reaction. And I think what I was trying to do in the
Yeah.
post is, one, tell the truth. And the truth was, I had this really cool opportunity to start a venture backed fintech company, which was really important to me. We did the whole venture thing. So we raised money. I think at the time when I was raising money, I was one of 100 Black women to ever raise more than $1 million in venture capital. And I remember going to,
Congrats.
thank you. I spent all of it.
Yeah.
It's all gone.
Also, I
Um,
mean, better than not spending it. That's what you're raising for,
that's
is to
true,
spend it,
that's
right?
true, and I have some spending stories on that, but, one of the yeah, I went to DC actually to visit a friend who I played soccer with at Cal, who's now
Yep.
some big shot lawyer, and we went out to brunch, and, I told her this, and she was like, "Oh, you mean 100 Black women like this year?" And I remember
Mhm.
being like, "No, Catchy, I mean, like, ever." And
Ever, ever,
yeah,
ever,
I
ever.
just like putting a point on that is very funny, like to me now, because it's just a good reminder of like how far we have to go.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, so I did that. We ended up raising, more than that, and trying to make something work for Gen Z aged people. Really was a market who, had to manage more than one way to make money. And a
Yep.
lot of that came from my time at Good Bets, where I was, starting this thing with all these different clients. But unlike you, I went the route of a little bit more of like um, a solo entrepreneur, didn't hire like a huge team. And so structurally, there's just like a lot of questions about how to do this yourself, and like, how do you manage these different streams of income? How
Yep.
do you monetize something that makes you happy and fit it into your life and your financial plans? And so that was something for me that um, I really struggled with and was new for me. I was enjoying the work that I was doing, but I just had a
Mhm.
really hard time putting into context, into this sort of larger context and financial plan for my life. And so that was really something I wanted to explore. And at the same time, and this is still happening, so many young people, and not just like young people, but I would say Americans, because that's a context I know the best, but so many Americans, like, of course, they're living paycheck to paycheck, which obviously doesn't feel good. But I think there's some sort of silver lining for some folks who maybe are oriented, like more like me, which is, well, if I need to make more money, how can I do that? How can I leverage my skills? How can I make a difference in a way that would allow me to more easily pay my rent, right?
Yep.
And so, kind of seeing this like rise in side hustling, technology is like a massive, tailwind for that as well. And so it just was an infinitely interesting problem to me. Like, how do you
Yep.
help young people better manage their money, better make their money, and it just feels smarter about their money when it feels like such a transient thing that's like out of your control. And
Mhm.
so that was the thing that we were kind of jamming on Boost, and then towards the end of the work, we went more towards debt, um, and that was kind of following the signs of the market a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, our consumer debt is out of control. It's sort of highest levels that it's ever been, across everything,
Yep.
autos, credit cards, etc. And so wanted to do that, and then simultaneously, folks might know that last October people had to start paying student loans again. And we had worked with this population who basically got out of college, knew they had student loans, but had never paid one. And so, for years, because of forbearance and
Yep.
COVID stuff, et cetera, they had no sort of context into that. And so, we tried to make the quick pivot with very little cash in the bank. And, I think I read this in the post that at the end, we just didn't have any gas in the tank. And so like, that's like the nice, like cute story. And I think the real story, that is real, but I think the story, I think the story that you don't often hear for some reason, because people don't want to talk about it, is like, I really wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to do everything that was required of me for many reasons. And the biggest one is like, I didn't know, right? You don't know what you don't know.
Yep.
And the biggest lessons I think I've really learned are people matter a lot. And not just who you hire, who you take money from, who you partner with, who you look up to, who you surround in your personal life. I mean, people talk about this, but entrepreneurship in that way, particularly venture-backed stuff. And so for folks who don't know sort of the venture-backed world, you're essentially getting money, and your job as a founder, and never forget this, I did not know this, and I learned pretty quickly, but too late, that your job is really to get returns for your investors.
Yep.
That
you have
is
a number
really
of bosses now based upon the number of people that have funded you, right?
Yeah. And it's I mean, the markup, like they want markups. And so markups for folks, basically, say someone says my company is worth $1 million and they buy a portion of it, or rights to buy a portion of it. They want to see that company become 10 million, become 100 million, become $1 billion, right? And so they operate in this sort of power law and economies of scale things, which are really cool and fascinating. But I entered the space thinking that I could find a way to preserve my like personal mission and interests, and sort of satiate the desire, or like my true responsibility as someone who was there to return capital to my investors. And I will say that, can you do both? I think so. And now I'm more certain that you can, because I've been in the situation. But I was not ready to do both. I did not know what it required, which meant that I had a really hard time trying to make it happen.
Yep.
And so, yeah, when I say I'm not ready, what it looked like day to day was I screwed up constantly. I had a
welcome back to the team.
Yeah. I screwed up constantly with all kinds of things, hiring people, making decisions, partnering with people. You learn so much about yourself. I told somebody it's like the most expensive professional development I've ever had. And it's like the most valuable. In some ways you have people's livelihoods in your hands. And when you take a swing, like, you better not miss. And that's something that, that's really hard to deal with. And so I'll give like a very specific context to some of this.
Sure.
We had gone, I think that like people might trace this back. I'm going to be like very high level here, just because I think it's really hard. I think it's hard to be an investor some days, and it's definitely hard to be a founder. So I don't want anyone to think I'm like picking on folks. But there was this moment where we probably had like 6 months of capital left, and basically these people I needed on the team, engineering team, decided to like quit like that week. We had a little bit of we didn't even have 6 months in the bank. We had like, I think we had like $30,000 or something in the bank, which is not a lot for people. You can't make payroll. Someone basically just like quit on Slack, and someone we really, really needed. And then, there was a little bit of like a domino effect, and they quit on Slack, and I'm like on the West Coast. So everybody saw it before me. And I guess like no one said anything. It's like a Slack message that like no one's putting like an emoji on,
Yeah, you're just
you
waiting.
know?
You're
And
waiting to see the boss's reaction.
we were like a week from like, I think a week or 2 weeks or something from launching this like new thing that was like, I was so certain this was like the thing that was going to get us back in the game. And, you know, we'd be able to all of this would have just been like a nightmare.
Mhm.
And I mean, that was terrible. So, you know, just like going into this moment where it's already tough, you're already like, you're sitting there convincing folks that this stuff can happen constantly.
Mhm.
But then you're looking at your bank account and you're like, you know, it's very, it's emotional. It's like kind of
Yeah,
hard to deal with.
yeah.
And so, you know, I ended up, this goes back to the people thing. I ended up calling a friend who helped me build the initial version, who's incredible. And I was like, hey, here's what happened. So I had my sad moment and then I was like, boom, get out of, get out of there, get out of
Mhm.
there. You can't do that because you're making all these promises to people. Um, and that would have been a time where I think most people would have just been like, you know what, it's done. We're done. We're not going to do this anymore.
Yeah.
But I was like, look, we're going to keep going. We're going to do something slightly different. We're going to like pivot. We're going to make sure everybody is, you know, on the bus with us and get things going. And we're going to swing.
Mm.
And I think I knew at that time, you could kind of see in the future. I was like, okay, well, I can get us like 6 months of this going. Cool. And I did that. And so I was like, this is like a 6-month bet. And yeah, there's a moment that I would go back and say, like, maybe I should just ended it there. Like maybe that should have been it. But like I said, I think you recognize that it's your decision. You
Yeah.
can swing. But like I said, like if you swing, don't miss. And I missed, and I think that was there were all these sort of rippling effects afterwards that I think did a massive number on like my psyche,
Mm.
um, my and all kinds of like tangible things in my life and like relationships and yeah. So I mean, those are the parts I think that people don't talk about,
Yeah.
right? And there's a lot of moments like that, but you know, I think it was a good experience. I would maybe do it again, but do it differently. But yeah, so for all the people who want to know what it was like, I mean, uh, I made a lot of mistakes, and but it was a cool experience. I will not make any of those again. But I think the reality is that we can better prepare people for that kind of opportunity. And actually, it's a great segue into 4.0 because the truth is like we have to better
Yeah.
prepare people to build things that don't exist.
And who not, then in a better position than you to do that from both like your passions and your skill sets, but also the most recent experience, right? And yeah, I want to go to 4.0, but I would just
Yeah.
say thanks for your vulnerability and your honesty, right? I would say obviously not common in this space in
Yeah.
entrepreneurship and business owners, as you mentioned. So kudos for you for doing that. I'll be semi-vulnerable back to you. And like, so part of my team feedback from our last team retreat was they wanted me to be more vulnerable and less around like
Mm,
business stuff and more around personal stuff. So I think that was interesting to me and also something I'm working through to try to be a better leader for my team as well. But I think for your ability to do that, your willingness to do it is incredible from afar. And so again, kudos. But then also, as you've said too, Nicole, like it's not fatal necessarily. I know it's
yeah.
tough. I'm not minimizing it, but I
Yeah.
think to your point, you and I understand this when we say it was tough. There are scars. There will always be scars, but you're obviously still physically standing, or I guess maybe metaphorically standing, currently sitting, but probably could stand if you wanted to, and like still ready to fight another day, and like now have this
Yeah.
cool opportunity at 4.0.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that. And what you just did is called mirroring. So I was vulnerable and you got vulnerable back. But let me
Mhm.
tell you the secret. That post probably came 6 months after I had all my mental breakdowns. So it was very cute and comforting that everyone was like, hey, you're going to be okay. And I was like, I'm okay.
You were past that.
Actually. And so it was actually, it's very cool to kind of be in that because you almost get to have both experiences at the same time.
Yeah.
Right? And see how people kind of engage you. But yeah, I think this idea that these things can make you stronger and better, um, is something that we kind of say as a platitude, but like, I am stronger and I'm better.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing to be reminded of. So thank
Yeah.
you.
It just hurts to get there sometimes, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But now we're at this kind of this precipice, this next opportunity, both like I think currently as a board member with 4.0 and then potential like interim CEO, not even potential, but actual interim CEO. And also I think responsible maybe for the search of the next CEO. So yeah,
Yeah.
please tell the people that don't know just like what 4.0 is, then we can go deeper onto like why it's such an
Yeah.
exciting opportunity right now in our country.
Well, I'll make this brief. It's funny in the notes. I mean, you probably saw this. You others have not seen this, but I think I wrote, I'm happy because I get to talk about my two favorite things, myself and 4.0, and spend all of our time talking about myself. But yeah, so 4.0, that was the entrepreneurial organization and community I mentioned earlier in my story. And so similarly to Greg, I was able to, you know, encounter them over a decade ago and really change the trajectory of my life. And basically, they're an education nonprofit. Used to be based in New Orleans. Now we're fully remote. And we sort of identify, invest in, and upskill, education entrepreneurs and leaders of the future tomorrow. And so we're always looking for the most empathetic, most ambitious people, most curious, like endlessly curious people, who want to make education better and make learning better. And that happens in all kinds of ways. And so we help sort of mini incubate, I guess you could say, different ideas that folks have. And then we provide through our programming, 4 core C's that we talk about constantly, which is coaching, community, curriculum. There's something else: capital, money, cash, important. So we do all of that, and we have a little bit of a different model. We're not like a YC or some of these bigger like incubators or accelerators. We give people a pretty tiny amount of cash, and actually one of our core fellowship is called the Tiny Fellowship. So we've given people, it's ranged between $5,000 and $10,000 to basically just test an idea and learn about design thinking, learn about empathy, these sorts of things, and test the efficacy of their idea. So that's our core programming. We've worked with probably like 2,000 different alumni, who are all over the place.
Yep.
And they're just so legit.
Yeah.
It's just hard to talk about. We have community that has built, massive, like, companies, massive school chains, and all ones that like have this sort of different twist that we care about a ton, which is, you're building something that the community is truly invested in. They're building with you. And I don't have time to tell Matt Candler, the founder's story, but I would say something that was really important to him. He helped grow the KIP network. He was their chief growth officer for a while. But one of the things I think I've learned from him, and that he may have seen firsthand, is the power of building when the community is right there with you.
Yeah, building with, not building
exactly
for, right? Yeah.
And so I had never really heard of that. I thought business, products, services were just something that some genius kind of, threw together in their garage and like gave to people. But the reality was, Matt and that core group at 4.0 and Hassan, after Matt had really solidified this as part of like our ed innovation culture more broadly, is that the way to do this right is to do it with people. And I've just seen it over the last decade permeate into how funders talk about their work. I was just doing this thing with New Profit, which is a huge intermediary social entrepreneurship funder in Austin. Yeah, I was with them in Austin, and they were talking about proximity and all these things, and I'm like, where did you hear about that? And so 4.0 has a little bit of a casual way of talking about those issues. And then we let all the management consultants can make them nice and pretty and put some chevrons on their decks. But I think it's been really, really cool to see how much that initial sort of DNA has kind of made it into like the greater ideology of the space. Like if you try to do something to people in ed innovation right now, it's not happening. It is not allowed. You will be canceled. I don't think canceling is real, but some people do. So yeah, it's a great org, and yeah, and we're looking for our next CEO.
Yep.
And I think what's important as someone who's been on the board and part of lots of different programming, and you know, the organization is incredibly special. I've talked to dozens of alumni in the past couple of months, and I talked to one yesterday who, is now doing 7 figures and massive state contracts with their work. And she was like, I would not be here without 4.0. It literally gave me the confidence to do this, the network of people I could go to and ask for help.
Yep.
And it cleared the path, and it made it so I could pay rent for a couple of months and like really again swing, right? And I
Yep.
think the idea for the next generation of 4.0 is we really started with a fail fast mentality. And I would love to see the organization as a board member go into what I was talking about earlier, which is a mentality where like you swing and don't miss. And it's not
Mhm.
that missing, like you'll be okay if you miss, but like
Right.
what if you didn't miss?
Yeah.
What if you built something with the community and you took a shot and like you made it? What if you made it every time? Like I'm just so excited about that future for the organization. And so, we're looking for somebody who they're okay with, charting out a future vision. And within that, of course, we want this sort of visionary person, but like someone who's trustworthy and we know
Mhm.
will stand in alignment with our values of building people up, of hospitality, of community. Like those are the things that I think are pretty critical. And the last thing I would say about this, as I've gotten back into the mix and hung out with a lot of my old funder friends, um, I was asking them about, I'll be honest, like the funding prospects in the future for our organization.
Of course. Yeah.
And always easier to ask at a happy hour, I will say. But I was like, just tell me the truth. Where are
We just
we?
got the title of the podcast. There it is.
Uh,
Always easier to ask at the podcast.
yeah,
At the
exactly.
happy hour.
And so, um, I heard pretty consistently, and I'll sum it up as 4.0 has a really distinct position in the ecosystem. And that in this education ecosystem, and it's really here to bring new innovations to the space. And that I heard that over and over again, and it was really this line that like got to me. And just like we're waiting for 4.0 to do something new,
Mhm.
and yeah, that really hit me. And so I think when we're looking for this new person, they really have to believe that that is part of the value proposition of the organization.
Yep.
That we're here to lead. Um, when we started with some of these fellowships, I mean, back then we were the only game in town,
Sure.
the only place saying, "Hey, you got an idea? It's good enough. Try it. We'll
Yep.
help you." Um, and now that's not the case, and that's great. But it means that it's time for the organization to evolve,
Well, yeah.
and build, build something new.
That's really cool. Yeah. I want to stick on the new part. I want to also offer maybe vulnerability, maybe not. 4.0, yeah, is great. In general, I was like, remember stalking them after school when I was teaching in Charlotte. Like, man, this organization looks so cool. Like, we don't have anything like this in Charlotte. I got to go for the fellowship a few years later just for that weekend. I was like, great, I'm just going to open this in Charlotte. I was like, we need one. There's money here. We're going to do this. And then after about 5 swings and misses, I was like, this shit's hard. Like, I'm not gonna open this shit in Charlotte. Somebody should, but apparently I'm not the one to open it. So like been a long time admirer of like Matt and the crew, and like all the work 4.0 was done. And I think, yeah, really cool that you are kind of leading the charge, but also the organization is at this nexus point with where we are in 2024 with everything else happening around education. So I think with that context, yeah, I would love to know like what is new to you and also like what is exciting to you, knowing that like you maybe not be able to craft it, and so we might just
Yeah.
be like sharing ideas right now. But what does new 4.0 look like?
What does new 4.0 look like? All right, y'all, for all of you applying,
Yeah, take
I'm just
notes, right?
tell you
You
all the
hear this in the
answers.
third round interview. Like, oh shit, that's a good
Yeah.
idea. I wonder how they thought
Um,
about that.
I think uh I think the organization needs to do a couple of things. I think one of the things it needs to do better, that I'm excited about, and I get to do some of this work while I'm here for this short period of time, is tell these stories. Um, I I just spoke with an alumni a little bit earlier today who said they were speaking to another alumni who also happened to be a very, very early funder
Mm.
of the organization. And that this guy told her, 4.0 doesn't make any lasting ventures. And I was just like, how misinformed is that guy?
Yeah, I was gonna
You
say,
know,
yeah, I
when
was
you
gonna
see
ask
like
a follow-up question.
a rooted school that's,
Yeah,
started in New Orleans, now is in Indy. I think they've got one in Nevada and Vancouver, Washington, working on one of the biggest cash transfer pilots for youth ever, right?
Mhm.
Like that's a 4.0 venture. You see Branching Minds just close a huge round with Bain Capital. That's a 4.0 venture.
Mhm.
Americon Tech that just got $1.5 million from New Profit. That's a 4.0 venture. And I can keep going. Glean Education, which I was just talking about, that Jessica had put together. I mean, they're doing statewide contracts. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, bringing new informed dyslexia training to educators that has never existed before. That's a 4.0 venture, right? And I think
I
what I
feel a
would
social media campaign coming up upon us.
yeah. I'm just a LinkedIn poster, all right? But it's I would like to see that. And Boost, even though it was in the fintech space, I mean, it was funded by Precursor Ventures, January Ventures, the House Fund at Berkeley. All of these like Boost is a 4.0 venture. We might not think about it the same way, but all the skills I learned here, the relationships I had, some of my first angel investors were 4.0 alumni. And so these stories, are so important because I think the future of 4.0 is really about telling a real story about cross-sector collaboration and how it's necessary for us to make education better. We need better board members. We need smarter superintendent. We for sure need smarter superintendents. We need smarter investors, funders, people who, are ambitious, they're sophisticated, but they're kind. And, I think that's where I would like to see 4.0 on the sort of external side. And I think internally, that's really going to be up to doing what they do best, which is listening to users, community. And I'd like to see the organization spend more time on this community I'm talking about and making sure they have the support, the social capital, and are continuing to build the social connective tissue that will allow all of us to thrive.
Yep.
So that sounds like a big job. And I'm excited to kind of see, who's interested in this work, because I can't think about anything that would be more meaningful than
Yep.
to see this organized and structured in a way that works, and also like fun. Like we need more parties. Let's bring our parties back.
Amen.
Those were always a win.
What I know you're maybe naively optimistic like I am, and I think everything you said makes sense, but it only, I would argue, makes more sense if the funding community is willing to fund it. So I guess the question to you is like, with the right amount, with the right leader and the right amount of clarity, is the funding community ready and prepared to continue to fund 4.0 and the next vision of it to continue to make it successful, in your opinion?
Good question. We also need a fundraiser because that's in our FAQs. But I'm going to say yes. And
Okay.
I won't call myself naively optimistic here.
Okay.
I think I'm pretty practical.
Okay. Excuse
And
me. Excuse me.
something that's, yeah. Um, and something that's going on right now that's not talked about very much in our space, which I have a couple of theories why. We're about to actually, enter this period of time where we're going to see the largest wealth transfer that we ever have. And so there's
Sure.
a world in which I was in philanthropy where there were lots of antique looking chairs and like, meetings at the top of the Transamerica building, and this sort of culture of philanthropy that sort of harkens back to some of these initial days of American philanthropy, like the Carnegies, Fords, Rockefellers, etc., where people were giving for different reasons. I think that period of time is behind us. In the same way that I think that in ed reform and ed innovation, some of those initial leaders who brought us major charter networks or, really big nonprofits that have been around for decades, like it's their time to retire, respectfully. It's not their time anymore. And so when I think about this next generation of philanthropists, they're in the 4.0 community. There are people who had exits that are now building their own foundations. There are people who, are itching to give back in a way that's smarter, more aligned with what they believe in, that they know has had an impact that they've experienced themselves.
Yep.
Right. And so again, I hope that new CEO can see that, leverage that. And I think that what's going to come along with this, and this is another place for 4.0 to do something new, is to truly model for people what it looks like to be supported by your community. How do you find sustainability with your community? How do you, do true value exchange? I think that's big work, but it's definitely not impossible. We have too many models outside of education of doing that. Like, let's bring it to ed. Like, again, that would just be so fantastic. And I think the funding's there. And, I think funders like peer pressure. I think when you look at,
For better or worse.
it's usually like worse, but I
Yep.
think we can make it, leverage it into better. People get bored. People like novelty. And 4.0 has always been good at staying like right at the forefront of like the cultural changes that are happening for people and educators in the space. And it'll continue to be a place that people look for in education to see what the future looks like. And our new CEO is just going to have to, they're just going to have to remember that and know that they're coming into an organization with a major legacy, but with a ton of assets.
I'm guessing they'll have some friendly board members remind them of that if they get misaligned.
Oh yeah, I love being on the board. I'm like, call me, but don't ask me to do anything.
All right, Nicole, let's get you out of here on a few kind of rapid fire questions, and then maybe at a more practical level. Where should very talented, very interested, very smart, very diverse people apply for this role?
Oh, I should have had that. There is let's see, because I'm at the computer. The O4 organization is running this amazing search firm. Can I like drop this here? I have to join I have to connect. I will just send this to you. But
yeah, please do.
Yeah, so it's on my LinkedIn. Just like find us, apply. If you want to talk about it, I'm happy to connect anybody with Regina, who's running the search for us over there. People can just email me at nicole@4pto.org, and I will put them in the right place. I also know you had notes. I'm just going off script here. I know you got to go, but like,
I'm here for you.
There's an AI question.
Yeah.
All right. I don't love it.
I saw this, and I think respectfully, I was like, she's going to be bullish. She's going to be bullish on this, but it's what I get.
I was going to be bullish on AI.
It's what I get for assuming, and also that we haven't chatted in a few years. So, but I'm fairly grumpy about it too, and so this excites me even more that we can bond about being grumpy about AI together.
I always have something to be grumpy about. I'm not grumpy. I'm just a little bit skeptical of it, and I would like to, especially coming from like tech and kind of coming back into this. I think what I learned in tech and like getting venture funded is that there are a lot of waves of like energy. And I think AI is really, really great for productivity.
Cool.
I have questions about if it can help people sort of do the core, the core parts of learning, right? Like if it can really stimulate creativity the way we want to, give people like better control of their own like cognition across different levels and places. And I think that the people who are going to help us figure that out are people who are actually really intimately involved in the technology. And so when I see folks being like, this makes things easier, and I'm kind of like, do you know how that works? And do you know
Yep.
why it works? And so, I have questions about that. And I think I wrote you a message on our notes. Like, I'm actually wanting to see people be more interested in other areas where there are just new use cases being developed because the technology is truly, truly new.
Mm.
LLMs and all this stuff, it's not new. It's just more accessible. And
Yep.
right now they've been really great for productivity. And that is amazing. But I think what happens is that like we all as like a species tend to like get better and smarter and elevate. And so I'm always looking at like kind of core technology that like allows students to do the stuff that we did with them in a way that's experiential, that actually speaks to what we know works about learning.
Yep.
And so one of the things I'm looking at a lot that I really like is spatial computing. And so, this is like Apple Vision Pro for people who don't know, but this is like technology that pretty seamlessly brings the virtual world in connection with sort of like the physical world.
Yep.
And so you can kind of think Minority Report, where you're, going through your little computer screen, but you can kind of see the background of your living room in the same place.
Yep.
And I'm much more interested in folks working on that stuff. There's this guy, Jonathan Teskey, former Meta guy, running something called Reframe XR.
Mm.
I think that's what we should be looking at instead of these chat GPT wrappers, which is also fine if it helps you. But I would like to see less productivity tools in education and more sort of hardcore, like, how do we rethink the way that we engage with technology,
Yep.
and make sure that like young people are engaging with the newest, best technology that they can actually build upon on themselves. And right now, I'm not sure that's AI, but I do think it's great for productivity. And, I use it sometimes. And I think it's great for literacy and differentiation and stuff like that. But
Yep.
like, so are like flashcards for people. I don't know. Now I'm just riffing. I'm going to stop there. AI is good. It's not Nicole's favorite.
I always thought,
I'm
I
gonna end
appreciate you
it.
sharing that. Context is helpful. I always thought, and maybe still do think it, like using XR or virtual reality or even VR as like a teacher training or teacher prep program. Like, I am a novice teacher. Nicole is controlling this like virtual classroom I'm teaching. And then you choose like these two kids all of a sudden start falling asleep because I'm a boring teacher. And now I have to go like practice waking them up and re-engaging them. And then like you're monitoring it. All like real life scenarios that will happen to teachers. But think about the training cycles and the reps. I know you and I talked about kind of sports and practice and watching
Yeah.
film last time. A
Wait,
way
you
to
you played
amplify.
football in college, right?
Yeah, you can probably tell by my. Well, you laughed a little too fast about how quickly that was a little too fast,
See,
Nicole.
that was that was vulnerability. You did it, Greg. You did it.
Yes, I played college football back in the day. That is correct.
Yeah, it's still the peak of my life playing college soccer. It's like that's the best I'm ever gonna be at anything. That's okay. We all need to peak. We all need to get kicked off our pedestal. Do you you have some rapid fire ones for me?
Yeah, I think last question before we jump. What does Square Pizza remind you of?
Okay, there's this new brewery. It's not new.
Okay.
Because there's one in San Francisco. I live in Oakland, which is 4 miles away for everybody. A
Okay, thank you.
place called Stellar Maker. It's like a
Okay,
brewery, and they have square pizza,
it's good.
and I think it's Detroit style, right?
So some
Oh, are
people,
you about to
yes.
school me on this? Please do it.
Some people call Detroit pizza Square Pizza. It's technically true. I think the origin of the name was from like square, more rectangle cafeteria pizza that they served back
Yeah.
in the day, which is how the name originated for the podcast. But I think some people call Detroit pizza square more like deeper dish situations. Uh, but if we're being completely honest, the thought was more cafeteria, thin square pizza days.
Mm. I feel like I offended you by saying that. But yeah, there's this brewery out here called Cellar Maker, and it's what I order.
Right.
But the thing it really reminds me of is that place. What that place really reminds me of is Oakland is a place where it's just been really transient. And whenever I see a new, the brewery is like semi new, when I see a new place crop up, like a new business, I just get like really hopeful for the future of the city. I really love the city and I want to see more of that. And so when I see sort of hipsterish and yuppie things pop up, it's complicated, but I do appreciate that, the city might be on an up and up.
Yeah. So to summarize, we're saying bearish on AI, bullish on yuppie hipster establishments.
And pizza that comes in a square. Always bullish on pizza. Even better when it's a square. But
That's
yeah,
perfect.
hope for all. Hope for all.
Nicole Jarbo, thanks so much for coming back and joining the podcast. And we'll certainly be kind of sharing, obviously, this episode, but also the opportunity to join and lead the incredible team at 4.0. And appreciate you jumping on to share about the incredible work you're doing, the incredible work the organization is currently doing, and the new work they'll be doing soon as well.
Awesome. Let's go. I love it. Thanks for folks who stuck around.
Awesome. Thanks, Nicole.